Awesome. We'll go ahead and get started then. So good morning. Happy Saturday. Thank you guys for being here for the bright and early Saturday morning session, especially if you guys are on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us. This is the last day of convention, so we're finishing off strong. We are talking about SafeSport today. So creating your SafeSport policy, tips and tricks. And we have both Pamela Adler here from USRowing. She's our Director of Talent Operations and SafeSport. And we have Cynthia Mejia here from SafeSport, who's training manager for the U.S. Center for SafeSport. So just some logistical questions. If you guys do have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I'm going to, if it fits, I'll ask them throughout the session. If not, we'll wait till the end. And then if you guys just want to talk amongst yourself, feel free to use the chat. And if you have any questions for me. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Cynthia and Pamela. But again, thank you guys for being here this morning.
Thanks so much for having us. We're super excited to be here. Pamela and I do plenty of work together over the year and over the past years now, or past 2 years, I think. So some of you may have seen us before doing SafeSport trainings in one capacity or another. So that's essentially what we're going to be talking about today. Let me go ahead and move to the title of our workshop. So how to create and update your SafeSport policy. So we are going to be covering just what the SafeSport policy kind of contains, specifically the MAP, so the Minor Athlete Abuse Prevention Policy. This is something that might be new for you. Some of you may have seen it before, but there were revisions that came this year. So Pamela worked really hard with our audit and compliance team over at the U.S. Center for SafeSport to get this customized to fit the needs of USRowing. And so we're also going to be walking you through how to customize it to fit your needs at your local affiliated organization. I know we only have an hour together, so let's go ahead and jump into the content. Like I said, we're going to talk about how to customize your SafeSport policy. We're going to be taking questions and answers. That's going to be toward the end though. But before we do all of that, I want to go ahead and explain to you a little bit more about who is the U.S. Center for SafeSport versus who is USRowing. And we're also going to cover some of those more detail about those policies. So at the U.S. Center for SafeSport, we're an independent and exclusive authority. We're responsible for responding to and preventing sexual, physical, and emotional abuse in the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement. So this includes USRowing. And that authority was designated to the center by the Protecting Young Victims from Sexual Abuse and SafeSport Authorization Act of 2017, which is now a federal law. So we actually opened our doors back in 2017 with, I believe it was 3 or 4 staff members. And then that law, which it's the law of 2017, but it came into effect a year later. And that's what gave us our authorization to function the way that we do. We're now at over 100 employees, which is amazing because we are a relatively new organization. And at the time, back in 2017, when we opened our doors, leaders across government and amateur sports felt compelled to establish a national SafeSport organization that's independent of the movement because of well-publicized instances that were happening and abuse affecting athletes. So we are the U.S. Center for SafeSport. And a lot of times we get confused for SafeSport. So people might come to Pamela and say, hey, Pamela, there's this SafeSport thing that happened. And Pamela might be like, I understand. And yes, while my role is SafeSport, and it's 2 words, so that's why I say it that way. Pamela's role is SafeSport, if you can see like on her title, and we're the Center for SafeSport. So we work very closely together, but we are independent of the movement. So our scope and work at the center and our annual funding comes from the USOPC, and this was further outlined in a second federal law that gave us the authority to function the way that we do, and that's the Empowering Olympic, Paralympic, and Amateur Athlete Act of 2020. And again, that is the second federal law that came into effect, and that was, I believe, November or late October of last year. So at the U.S. Center for SafeSport, we have 3 primary focus areas, and those functions come from what's outlined in those federal laws. So we have our response and resolutions unit, and they receive and investigate reports of abuse or misconduct, specifically child abuse and sexual misconduct. And we receive these through the Report a Concern portal on our website, or you can also call in a report. And we publish a record of individuals that are sanctioned from sport participation in a centralized disciplinary database. So participating in the Olympic movement is a privilege. And if you are found to have violated the policies, the code, anything along those lines, you can be sanctioned from participating. We also ensure and establish compliance to athlete safety policies that individuals and organizations in the movement must adhere to. And a great example of this is the minor athlete abuse prevention policies that we're going to be talking about today. And finally, we do training and outreach to promote athlete safety to stakeholders in and beyond the movement. So this is our one function where we kind of go outside of just the Olympic and Paralympic movement. But today's a great example. So this is where I work closely with Pamela. Like, she works with other functions of our center, but also with training. We know that it's really important that people out there are educated, that they understand what these policies are. And all of these three focus areas align to underscore our vision, which is that every athlete will be safe, supported, and strengthened through sport. And so I know I've talked plenty now about the U.S. Center for SafeSport. So I want to pass it over to Pamela to talk more about the SafeSport program at USRowing.
Thank you, Cynthia. So as Cynthia mentioned, we are two completely separate entities, but work very closely together, especially in all areas of misconduct. As she mentioned, if you have, you see a violation of sexual misconduct, that is always reported directly to the U.S. Center for SafeSport, but other forms of misconduct are usually handled at the local level by your member organization. And then if that doesn't work out, USRowing is always available to you. We created a new policy that will go into effect January 1st, 2022, to outline the changes of the U.S. Center for SafeSport minor athlete abuse prevention policies. And there were some key changes that happened that I've listed on this slide. The most notable changes are dual relationship exception, and basically it's so that parents, guardians can show with written consent, and usually we ask for everything to be yearly for written consent, if their child can have interactions with someone. In-program contact is a good example, and it limits who minors can have access to. Another change was partial or full jurisdiction. That basically means that anything under USRowing falls under our jurisdiction, and this is for safety. Personal care assistants were another good one. This basically is for the Paralympic Committee, but also the Olympic Committee may need personal care assistance as well. And then regular contact is explaining what that means when you have regular contact with minors. Cynthia, you can go to the next slide.
Perfect. And thank you for that, Pamela. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth. I see that somebody asked for examples. So I'll wait on that, and then you can ask if there's something specific that you want an example for. So we've been talking about these SafeSport policies. So USRowing essentially puts together two of our policies. So we have two guiding documents that kind of help shape what it is that we do. So the first one is the SafeSport code. So this one we update it on an annual basis, just so you know. So if you've seen a past version of it, you'll probably see a new version of it coming this April. And we always post something called noteworthy revisions as well on our website. And the SafeSport code is essentially a great tool kind of for leading that investigations process, or we call it that response and resolutions process. So it talks about jurisdiction, so personal and subject matter, for example. So is the person that we received the report about within the U.S. Olympic movement? Like, are they under our personal jurisdiction? Are they a member, an adult participant of USRowing? or are they not affiliated with the movement at all, in which case we don't have jurisdiction over them. Then there's also subject matter jurisdiction. So Pamela and I both kind of mentioned this. So at the center, we have exclusive jurisdiction over child abuse and sexual misconduct. And then we can exercise discretionary jurisdiction. And we will do that on a case-by-case basis. Like if there's something like hazing or harassment, anything emotional or physical abuse is typically going to be investigated by your LAO or by USRowing. There are some instances where it might get sent up to the US Center for SafeSport. It also has the definitions outlined there, like what is prohibited conduct? What do we mean when we say child abuse? What do we mean when we say sexual misconduct? It also talks about reporting. So I believe everybody on here is a mandatory reporter. So what are your mandatory reporting responsibilities? And along with that, what does that process look like? There's not just a 1-800 number that we call for different report or for different types of abuse. That's going to look a little bit different. And then when it comes to resolution procedures, so say we do accept jurisdiction over this and we're going to make an investigation, or it's going to be an informal investigation, a formal investigation, whatever that might look like. What is that procedure? So that's outlined in the code. And if they are found to have violated the code, what are the sanctions within the movement? And then that's something that would get posted to that CDD. And I see a question in there, but I'll wait on that just a little bit, or I think Pamela's handling that. Another policy, the one that we're going to be focusing on, is that minor athlete abuse prevention policies, or we refer to it as the MAP. So this is really interesting because it's an obligation under federal law. So it says that first federal law actually says that we're to establish one-on-one reasonable interactions. So what's a good outline for that? And it also creates consistency within all the NGBs, all the PSOs. So not just USRowing was given this. So we have our model policy and then USRowing. So Pamela was like, here you go, now customize it to fit the needs, the language of USRowing. But USRowing wasn't the only one. Everybody else within the movement also received this, and they're also all going to be implementing this by January 1st, 2022. So we know that these policies are really needed because it's outlined in the federal law, but also beyond that. So research has shown that there are identifiable high-risk situations within a sporting environment that are related to harassment and abuse. So this means that there are certain situations where the risk of experiencing harassment and other forms of abuse in sport has found to be higher. So we know that child abuse often happens in isolated one-on-one situations. So real cases of child sexual abuse that have been studied by researchers has shown that child abuse is often perpetrated in these isolated one-on-one situations. And that's why the MAP has a specific section that's dedicated to limiting interactions between youth and adults to reduce the risk of abuse. So we understand that one-on-one interactions can be really helpful for athlete development. We're not against that. But we do know that we have to put certain procedures in place to protect both the coach and the athlete, or whoever it might be, the team managers and the athletes that they're working with. So coaches and team managers can still have these one-on-one interactions, but again, you just want to make sure that you're putting other things in place to help keep sports safe. Sorry, we were talking earlier about how I'm just not a morning person, so I might struggle through my words a little bit on a Saturday morning, but I'll get to the point. So abuse can begin, or it can continue to happen outside the sport environment with electronic communication. I mean, even before COVID, we were heavily relying on electronic communications. During COVID, it only increased. And I mean, we live in 2021, it's about to be 2022. We're all texting, video chatting, we're on social media, all that kind of stuff. So it does cover any kind of electronic communication, whether it's through an app, whether it's through group messaging, anything along those lines. So there's a specific section in the map that's dedicated to one-on-one interactions between adult participants and minor athletes that can happen through text, call, or social media. And then one of the things that I try to be cautious about when I'm talking about all this is it's not just the coach, or I hate saying like, oh, if the coach is being abusive or anything along those lines, because it's not just from the coach that abuse that can occur. It can also happen from peers or from team managers or other people. So we know that bullying, hazing, and harassment among peer athletes often occur when minors are unsupervised. So the map has a component on monitoring locker rooms, changing areas, or similar spaces. So the requirement is that organizations monitor those spaces to ensure that these policies are being followed. This also ensures that peer-to-peer abuse is not happening while the minor athletes are unsupervised. Then certain environments are high-risk areas for abuse in sport. So things like locker rooms, cars, away travel, and social situations. So individual training sessions or non-sport social events are the most often kind of place or situation where abuse occurred. So again, the map is so important because it's putting forth requirements to prevent abuse that could happen in these environments. So with that, that's why that map is created, but we also are interested in making sure that we are revising it on a regular basis, that we're getting feedback from those of you that are in the movement. So if you do ever are going through your own policy and you're like, you know, this doesn't make sense, or this could be improved, definitely send that up to Pamela, and then she can send it up to us. Because we do collect feedback and we try to make revisions based on the feedback, because we want it to be relevant and useful for you. We don't just want to make a policy and, you know, you figure it out. We want to make sure that we're accessible and fitting the needs. So we did receive feedback from the NGBs and PSOs about how to improve the 2019 map. So the one that we're talking about today is going to be for the 2022 map, which again is effective as of January 1st. So these are the top 8 changes that were made. And Pamela already talked about these a little bit more, but I'll go more in detail. So the first is regular contact. So this is a new definition, and it's providing clarity for who is an adult participant and therefore must follow the map and the SafeSport code. So the new definition of regular contact is ongoing interactions during a 12-month period where an adult participant is in a role of direct and active engagement with any minor athlete. And then the next update that we did was organizational versus individual requirements. So this clarifies the structure of the map. We made it much clearer this time what's an organizational requirement for you versus what do your individual members need to do in order to meet these requirements. So it now explicitly states that the organization has to track adult participants that complete the required SafeSport trained core, whereas previously this was just in the map implementation guide. So it also requires organizations to offer parents training on an annual basis. Additionally, each NGB must require its LAO or its local clubs to implement the required prevention policies within their organization. It also provided consistency. So we received feedback around getting consistent timeframes for when consent needs to be obtained. So is it for every situation? Is it a one and done, or should this be done on a regular basis? So consent has to be obtained at least annually under the new map. And the next piece seeks to align the map terminology with that in the SafeSport code. So the SafeSport code and the map work together. So we just wanted to make sure that that aligns. So you're going to notice in the new map that there is a terminology section at the end. A personal care assistant exception. So Pamela talked about this earlier. So we heard from a lot of adapted sports and Paralympic sport that the need to address personal care assistants who work with athletes with disabilities. So there are now exceptions to the map for these individuals. Then dual relationship exceptions. So I know Pamela answered a question in the chat about an example for this. So this exception exists when an adult participant has a dual role or a relationship with a minor athlete, like an uncle, maybe, it's my cousin or my nephew is also is on the team, but I'm their aunt or their cousin, something along those lines. So another example of this could be if a coach is also like a family friend outside of sport. And then there's that close in age exception. So this was really built for that college age or high school age kind of age limit or frame. So this exception allows for in-program contact between an adult participant and a minor athlete if that adult participant has no authority over the minor athlete. So essentially they're peers. It's not that one is a coach and one is an athlete. They can't have authority over them. And the adult participant is not more than 4 years older than the minor athlete. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of for like that college, high school age range. So, someone was 17 one day, now they're 18, or they're just recently become an adult and they're navigating those relationships in a different manner. And then there's the addition of in-program contact. So the new map includes a definition of this, and we'll actually go through this in a couple slides. So sports related contact between a minor athlete and an adult participant can occur in many locations. We know that it's not just at facilities that are under the jurisdiction of USRowing. So the map must be adhered to during all in-program contact. So I'll pause on that one because I have a slide on it. And then we also increase the resources that we have available. We know that this is a lot of information. Right now we have an hour together. We're almost halfway through. So we're not going to go into exact detail with everything. So we have more resources on our websites. We have template consent forms. We have a map manual. And there's additional tools, like we have some animations, one pagers. I'm not sure that those are exactly on the website, but those will be released in the new year. So keep a lookout for those. We're also offering some really informative sessions. So we are doing like 2-hour sessions for different audiences. So one for parents, one for administrators, one for adult athletes, and one for coaches. So we're offering those through the end of the year, and we're also going to be offering them in the new year. So again, this is where we'll go through the policies in depth. We do scenarios, answer any questions. So it's a really great resource. They are free of charge. They are aimed to be for local affiliated organizations. So you can find those at US Center for SafeSport /MAP, MAAPP. And I can also drop that link in the chat in just a little bit. So a quick overview of the map. So these are the required components of the map. It's broken down into 3 sections. We also have an additional section, which we added this year, and it's called the recommended policies for keeping young athletes safe. That's not a mandatory piece of it. They're, again, recommended policies. These are the mandatory pieces. So I'm just going to cover these for the sake of time. So the education and training policy. So this is what's required of all adult participants in the organization. And then organizational requirements for education and training and required prevention policies. So this is what's required of LAOs, of NGBs. And then there's the required prevention policies for one-on-one interactions. So how adult participants can safely interact with minor athletes in a sports environment. And these requirements really lay the groundwork to promote a culture of athlete safety and well-being. So let's go ahead and jump into what these look like. Ooh, let's see. So this is the education and training cycle. So our education and training policy requires that adult participants that have regular contact with any amateur athletes who are minors, all adult participants that have authority over any amateur athletes that are minors, or all adult participants that are an employee, a board member, anything along those lines of an LAO or of USRowing, that they complete training developed by the center. And so the requirement is for all LAO staff and board to take this training cycle. If they're an adult participant. And what's an adult participant? So it's anyone that's over the age of 18. They're a member or license holder of USB or US Rowing, an employer board member. Board members oftentimes ask why I don't have any contact with athletes, or sometimes we get staff members that say, no, I do finance. I don't have any contact with athletes, but as staff members, as board members, you are considered to have authority over them. Also, anyone that's within the governance or disciplinary jurisdiction, or they've been authorized, approved, or appointed by US Rowing to have regular contact with or authority over minor athletes. So this essentially starts with the SafeSport trained course. So on year 1, you're going to take this 90-minute course. And then on year 2, you're going to have to take a refresher. So you're going to take refresher 1, that's a 30-minute course, refresher 2 on year 3, refresher 3 on year 4. The 3 and the 4, the numbers kind of throw me off. But anyway, so you do this on an annual basis. And once you have taken refresher 3, the next year, you're going to restart the cycle. And we know that for a lot of this, it's like practice. Like you don't just teach someone a method and send them off and you're good. You never have to revisit it. You practice, practice, practice until you get it right, until that's ingrained in your brain. And so same deal with safety training. We want to make sure that we are revisiting it. And that we understand what abuse is, how to identify the red flags, what to do if you see something occurring. So that's why these are so important. And so, Pamela, do you want to tell people how to access that SafeSport training?
Yeah, so I'm just going to answer. Somebody's asking if adults would need to be SafeSport trained. So the policy starting January 1st is for all adult participants of US Rowing to take SafeSport training. There's 2 kinds of SafeSport training that we are requiring. The first is the one that Cynthia talked about for coaches, administrators, board members, etc. The other is if you're an adult athlete only, there is adult athlete training that is required of you. That training is 30 minutes only, and it would need to be also taken on an annual basis. So the U.S. Center for Safe Sport changed their learning management system this year in 2020. And so you can log onto the US Rowing website, and in the Safe Sport section, it tells you how to access the new training, but the new site is called Safe Sport Trained. And there are directions to log on. You will need an enrollment key. That enrollment key is very important because it affiliates you with US Rowing. And that way, you as an administrator can then see who in your roster has taken the training on the database and who needs to take training, etc. If somebody logs into SafeSport Trained and they don't use the enrollment key, there's no way to know whether or not training has happened.
Yes, thank you so much. And so you can see that enrollment key is right there. And I'm going to volunteer Pamela to provide additional support should you need any. Our email addresses are going to be at the end of this presentation. I always throw Pamela in there whenever we have presentations. So for the next component that I was mentioning for organizational requirements, so we have 2. So it's the education and training, and then the one-on-one interactions. So under education and training, so you have to identify who needs to take the training within the LAO, and again, offer minor athlete training annually and offer parent training annually. So we do have a parent training. We do have a minor athlete training available. These are not mandatory. You don't necessarily need to track those. There have been some NGBs that say, hey, parents, we are requiring that you take this, and they try to encourage that as much as possible. But the one that we say under our MAP and our policies is that adult participants do have to do that core training cycle. Now for required prevention policies and implementation. So Organizations have to adopt the required prevention policies, and we'll talk about those. Previously, we had 6 required prevention policies, and this year we actually have 7. So we just split some of them up and clarified them essentially. There also has to be a reporting mechanism to report MAP violations. So if we're going to have a policy in place, what happens when somebody doesn't follow it? I believe for USRowing, these are supposed to be handled by the LAO. Pamela, does that sound right? Yeah, okay. I work with a lot of other NGBs, so it gets easy to mix those up. But so those should be investigated by the organization, by the local club. There may be some instances where it needs to be moved up if it's more severe or anything along those lines, or if it's tied to another case. And then organizations must appropriately investigate and resolve received reports. So let's go ahead and move on to the in-program contact. So I mentioned this earlier. This is something that we added in. The MAP applies to in-program contact, and so there are 3 jurisdictional buckets that address the scope of the MAP. So there's facility or sanctioned events. And so these are specific instances identified where the policy only applies when at a facility partially or fully under the jurisdiction of an organization or at a sanctioned event. And it's only limited to those situations that have to be facility-based. The second is in-program contact, which we're going to talk about. And the third is, I'm blanking on the third one right now. So we're going to talk more about the in-program one. Let me go ahead and cover that while I think of the, the third one is that there is no geographical component. So that's why I always forget about that one. So like if you think about our electronic communications policy, it doesn't matter if you're at home or if you're at a sanctioned event, because there's no like real geographical component that comes to that. And we also call that no jurisdiction. But for in-program contact, essentially what this says is we came up with this test so that you can assess whether something is in-program contact. So it applies to one-on-one interactions, individual training sessions, athletic training modalities, massages or rub downs, locker room conduct, transportation, and lodging. And so in order to determine if something is in program, you have to see, is there an adult participant? Is there a minor athlete? And is there activity related to sport? So an adult participant, we've talked about that. Is there a minor athlete? So this would be an amateur athlete that's under 18 years of age that participates in or participated within the last year in an event, program, activity, or competition that's part of or partially or fully under the jurisdiction of USRowing. And then is it related to sport? So this can be like, is it practice? Is it an award ceremony, a fundraiser, anything along those lines? So I'm not going to list them all because there's hundreds of activities that are related to sport. But if you have an adult participant, a minor athlete, and it's related to participation in sport, all these 3 components will equal in-program contact. So an example of this, or another example is, let's say that there is an adult participant. So there's, let's say, Coach G, and then there's Sally, who is a minor athlete, and they go to church together, and the church is having a fundraiser. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be related to participation in sports, so that would not be considered in-program contact. However, Coach G and Sally are going to the USRowing fundraiser, in which case that's related to participation in sport, which does equal in-program contact, and the MAP policy needs to be followed here. So I see a question here. As a community program committed to DEI initiatives, we serve adults and juniors to whom we are introducing the sport. Many don't speak English, have internet, or have functional home lives. These requirements you are presenting are major hurdles. Does the organization have authority to exempt such examples? So for example, for the training cycle, those are available in different languages. Before COVID, we were able to travel out and do these presentations or those trainings in person. However, COVID also presented us with a lot of limitations in that regard. As for the MAP trainings, right now we are offering them in English, but we are getting the MAP translated to Spanish. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker and I'm a training manager, so I'm actually going to be doing some trainings in Spanish. The original plan was that we would be going out to local organizations, or like we would be picking like major cities around the country and doing in-person trainings, to combat those internet issues. But we're hoping that COVID allows us to do that. So keep a lookout in like newsletters from USRowing for more information about that. But thank you, that's a great question, and I'm so happy to see those commitments. So let's cover the required prevention policies. And Pamela, I'm going to let you. Should we go in depth on these, or should I save time for questions? I know that we're getting questions as we go.
Let's move forward and save, and so we
Okay.
have time at the end.
Perfect. So I think this question that's coming in, if a coach arranges something outside of the program, like a dinner or retreat for the varsity boat, is that considered in-program contact or not? So because it's for the varsity boat, yes, because it's kind of like a team bonding event from where I'm seeing it. So I would say that's in-program contact. So for required prevention policies, these are the policies that we have. So I mentioned that there's 7, previously there were 6. So if you did follow the previous map, make sure you're just keeping in mind to take another glance at it. So for one-on-one interactions, so they have to be observable and interruptible. And so this is kind of like the baseline for all the other policies. You'll see that it says like meeting and training sessions or anything, or lodging, it's going to say follow one-on-one interactions policy as part of that policy. So it says that things or activities and interactions need to be observable and interruptible. So there have to be people around that are able to observe, and people that are able to stop the interaction if they need to. So an example of this is, let's say that you pull an athlete to the side and there's athletes all around you, and they or you're at an event, let's say you're at an award banquet, maybe let's go with this example, and you pull an athlete to the side, the event is still happening, the dinner is still happening, and people around you can see you. So because people can see you, they can jump in if needed, then it complies and it's observable and interruptible. Now, let's say you took this athlete as a coach out to the hallway and closed the door. Now people can't see what's happening and they're not able to jump in if something inappropriate was happening or anything along those lines. So then that would not be observable and interruptible. So the one-on-one interactions policy also talks about the exceptions. So we talked about like the personal care exception, the dual relationship, the close in age exception, and the one that we haven't talked about is emergencies. So basically if an emergency situation happens, so let's say the athlete's parents were in a car accident and you need to drive them home. So in this case, you don't need to follow everything that's included in that transportation policy, or inclement weather. And you need to reach out to the athlete individually just to let them know. We still say, make sure you're documenting this in some form of way. Your organization might have this already established, or it might be a good thing for you to think about how to document this within your organization then. The next one is meeting and training sessions. Athletic training modalities, massages, and rub downs. For the sake of time, I'm not going to cover what these policies each include. I'll keep you guys for way over time if I do that. Locker rooms and changing areas. So we had talked about like monitoring for this. We know that peer abuse is often perpetrated in situations where they're not supervised. electronic communications. So this is the one that doesn't include that observable and interruptible, but it includes open and transparent. So this says that because open and observable doesn't really, it applies more to like physical situations rather than like these virtual situations. So by open and transparent, we say like an adult participant needs to be copied on all communications, or the parent or guardian or another adult family member of the minor. So let's say that you're a coach and you get a text from one of your athletes saying, "Hey coach, I felt really off. Is there any recommendations you can give me about technique?" Even though that minor athlete initiated that conversation, make sure that you're replying and copying another adult participant. It can be maybe another coach, maybe it's another adult family member that you have access to, or their contact information, or just the parent or guardian. This also applies for like group chats or like team conversations as well. And also just make sure that it's professional in nature, that it's talking about the sport. I understand that sometimes there's close-knit communities and you might have a minor athlete that's going through a difficult time and they're asking you for relationship advice. But we say that communication should be limited to, activities and sports related conversations, unless there's one of those exceptions like that, close in age or dual relationship or anything along those lines. Or like that emergency situation where that's where that might come in, where like you're contacting them or you're calling them and saying, "Hey, practice is canceled because we're under tornado watch," something along those lines. And then transportation policies and lodging. So again, if you want to learn more about these, I really encourage you to look on the website. That's uscenterforsafesport.org /MAP, MAAPP, and you'll find more information on these. Also in the map, you'll find what each policy consists of. And we're going to have some animations, some one-pagers available for you in the new year. And we also have those MAP trainings available that you can sign into, and they're live. So there are set times and we walk through scenarios and we walk through the rationale of the scenarios and also answer any additional questions. So Pamela, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you for this piece.
So as Cynthia mentioned, there's been some changes that are going to take effect January 1st. And all of this information, what she mentioned about the US Center for Safe Sport MAP policies, et cetera, they are all available on the USRowing website. We have created a template that you can use to create your own policy. It's based off of the US Center for Safe Sport approved USRowing Safe Sport policy manual. So there's a lot of changes. It looks a lot different than what the policy was prior to now. And the MAP, there's a lot of changes within the MAP section of the USRowing policy. We've also created some signs and some MAP resources that are also available on the website. I'm not showing them here on the slideshow because it's too much and there's too many and we're very limited on time, but feel free to, review the template, go to the template, use the template to your liking. You can craft it as your own. For example, if you don't have minor athletes at all, there's a lot of sections that you may not even need. And also feel free to reach out to me. I can help you on an individual organization basis.
Perfect. So I know we have 15 minutes left, so we wanted to save time for questions, or if we don't have any questions and there's like a specific policy that you have questions about, I can go ahead and review that in depth. But thank you so much. I hope that this was informative for you and that, that there's more resources available too that you can use.
And again, if you have any questions specific to creating your own template after looking at what we've put on our website, don't hesitate to reach out.
It doesn't look like there's anything coming in question wise. We can give it a few minutes and see. Oh, there actually is one. Does SafeSport jurisdiction extend to incidents that happen outside the US?
Yes, so we have personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. It's not so much geographical jurisdiction that we're like limited by. So as long as it's somebody that's an adult participant within the movement, and it's, let's say that you were like, hey, we traveled out to Tokyo and we saw financial corruption happening. Like we don't cover financial abuse or anything like that. We cover child abuse, including child sexual abuse, emotional and physical misconduct, and that includes like hazing, harassment, bullying, and sexual misconduct with adults as well. And again, it has to be within the movement, and or there has to be jurisdiction, like are they a member of USRowing? So that's where I would apply. And for those situations, like if abuse was happening or if the map wasn't being followed, like if the map wasn't being followed, you would then still report that, like, hey, we were out at a competition in Europe and we're supposed to be following these policies, but whatever the coach or a staff member wasn't following the policies, you still want to make that report. And if it's something containing abuse, you can still report it to the center or to USRowing, and the law enforcement side of it would look a little bit different, but we can walk you through that.
Awesome, thank you. There's another question in the Q&A. Is there a training session or video specifically for the junior athletes?
Is it for the map or for just general a SafeSport training? And well, let me go ahead and answer for those anyway.
Perfect.
So
for MAP is the clarification follow-up.
Okay, great. So for MAP, we don't have it for junior athletes necessarily. So we do encourage you to always share this information, to be like very proactive, letting them know, hey, I'm not able to communicate one-on-one with you because this is what the policy entails. We do have specific trainings right now for adult athletes, but that's actually a really good recommendation for the junior ones. I would recommend that you like share the animations with them.
There is, just for SafeSport training, there is training for minors.
Yeah, and so those are actually being revised right now. But we are having one for like that middle and high school age. So we're kind of blending those together until we finish revising like the one for a younger population, like K through 2, 3 to 5, or grades K through 2, I should say, and grades 3 to 5.
Is the volunteer training live yet? Someone is asking if there's non-rowing member training.
No, not quite yet. We are, I would say spring of 2022, it's going to be available. But we do have, if you go to our training courses, we have different ones available. Like we have a parent course. We also have a toolkit for parents as well. So whether you're a parent or not, that's also just really good information overall, because it talks about like the different kinds of abuse, how to identify any red flags, what to do, some talking points about how to ask a minor, like, hey, did this happen, or anything along those lines. For y'all that are within the movement, we're also going to have a mandatory reporting course. It goes a lot more in depth into that, and that's going to be available January, I want to say. We're ahead of schedule, so I just want to be mindful of that. But you can look for it in January.
Awesome. So this is going back to locker room supervision. If junior athletes know what is being watched for, enforcement could be different from an adult in the locker room. So I guess more clarification on what that supervision looks like in that role.
Yeah, so for locker room monitoring, what we say is, so assign like a volunteer or a staff event person to just, sometimes this looks like standing outside of the locker room, making sure that nothing crazy is going on there. If you're doing like locker room checks, making sure that it's still observable and interruptible so that another adult participant is present. Making sure that you're not one-on-one with this situation. There's also additional things that come to play, like making sure that the athletes know that there are no photo or recording capabilities allowed in the locker room. Pamela, I don't know if you want to add into that or
No, you covered everything.
I do a lot of these map trainings.
You can do it in your sleep. Awesome. If there's any last minute questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. There's nothing.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely why youth training is needed. And so I will say, for myself, my director and my CEO, we actually came from NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I know my CEO and I, we work specifically like on NetSmarts and KidSmarts. So we know the importance of getting youth educated and empowered, and because if they know what abuse is, they're less likely to do it. So it's definitely a priority for us. That's why we're revising them right now to make sure that they fit the needs. And I agree. We speak Spanish at home, so I'm actually leaving for Mexico tomorrow. So Spanish is very important to me, and not just Spanish. I've been living out in LA, so that's language access is a huge thing for us. And we're working on getting a contract signed with translation companies so that we can have these resources available, and not just available, but accessible. So we're working with like screen readers, just trying to see what more we can do. And we definitely appreciate any suggestions. My email is on the screen, cynthia.mejiacolin@safesport.org. So it always helps to know exactly what's needed or anything along those lines. So as for the map, I know that over the next few weeks, I'm actually going to be recording, like pre-recording the sessions that talk about the policies, what each policy consists of, doing scenarios and so forth. And then we're going to post those to the website so that there's accessibility to that for Spanish speakers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pam. Is there anything else that you want to go over?
No, obviously, if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to Cynthia or myself. And we're here for you. We're here to help you. We're here to make sport safe and better.
Awesome. And let me address this one question. So Jill asked, in a previous webinar, it was mentioned that USRowing is going to have a volunteer membership that will be no cost so that volunteers can access SafeSport training. And I'm guessing that was just addressed in the session that's happening right now too. So I'm kind of watching both. That is accurate. It's happening within the new year. So more information will be distributed about that, but it is so we can get more people trained. So that's definitely a resource that you guys will be bombarded with. You'll understand fully what is encompassed in that, but we're excited to offer that. And then we have a few more questions came in. Do coaches who are public school employees and trained in their SafeSport need to do your training?
Right now, the answer is yes. And we have reached out to the center to find a workaround. But right now, the answer is you do have to take the US Center for SafeSport training.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Cynthia. As they mentioned, go ahead and email them if you have any additional questions. And there is also a link in the welcome email to Sketch. If you guys have follow-up questions that weren't addressed in this, go ahead and put that in that questionnaire, and then I will reach out to our speakers and get the answer to you sent later this week. So today or tomorrow. Again, thank you. Go ahead and check out our Kate Ackerman session for the medical update in the next panel. And then we also have safety and a regatta prep conversation coming up soon too. So we will see you guys in the next Zoom room. Have a good day.
And I dropped in the link for or the website for the more map information for that lives on the U.S. Center for Safe Sport website.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.